All right. So what's going on YouTube? What's going on? I'm just saying BB filling in for Mike. And we are going to take a look at some videos about transporting and what it looks like on a real life side. So the first one is Faces of Human Transporting. And this is just the introduction. It's I think 9-part series. So we're just going to jump into it. Let's see what we can learn today.
Collaboration is essential to helping trafficking victims. Our task force is known as WASH Act, the Washington Advisory Committee on Trafficking. We do have really strong relationships between law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, and social service agencies who are directly serving victims. We wanted to talk about the Freedom Network.
Having us all work together equally and recognizing equal partnership has been important to boosting victim services.
For many years, law enforcement and social service agencies sometimes were the very best, kind of a bit wary of each other. When you work in partnership, you're willing to kind of break through some of those natural barriers, and that has really been essential for us with reaching out to the victim to building the great cases that we've been able to do.
Having law enforcement partners who say, we can't do our work without service providers really does show the rest of the community that we work with that we're equally respected.
They're a tremendous resource for us.
For me, 35 years in law enforcement, the key to any success is relationship building. I've met some of our collaborative individuals on a one-on-one basis. You can't move forward unless you know the problems that your partners experience. What are some of the pitfalls, the road bumps? So establishing those individual relationships are very important.
The ultimate goal of our task force here in Chicago is to raise awareness and to provide more services for the victims and to successfully prosecute the cases. One of the necessary goals along the way is to be able to provide appropriate services for the victims.
It's all about planning to serve.
Really having a good response from our law enforcement partners.
Looking at your challenges, looking at your area of expertise, and working together.
We need to have trust between the NGOs and law enforcement so that NGOs feel comfortable coming to law enforcement when their client has given them consent to report the crime and to begin developing a prosecutable case.
One of our issues is we chose
It builds a mutual respect for the differing roles, but also the common mission that we have to serve survivors of human trafficking.
I experienced labor trafficking. We were really scared. We were uncertain what's going to happen. The first day that we arrived in Biloxi, we didn't have money to buy food. And then we met social worker and agents from ICE, started interviewing us, asking questions about the case and all those things that we went through. But our case, it was already open in Kansas. And they start helping us because we provide enough information on what they did to us. They went to jail for years and years.
Collaborations across state and across the U.S. and actually beyond that are really important because we can learn what's worked in other states or other areas or territories, what hasn't. We can learn from certain experts in certain fields so as not to duplicate efforts that maybe weren't really effective and maybe try new and innovative ideas.
You really want to have a close working relationship between your prosecutors and your investigators. And by the same token, because our targets are by definition multi-jurisdictional, if we don't have a close working relationship with our federal partners, we're only going to see a piece of the puzzle.
The more that we can help share information and communicate with one another and coordinate our efforts, then I think the better off we can be as far as effectively developing operational plans on how to work better together.
If you see something, say something. But in order to do that, you have to be able to recognize what you're seeing, and you have to be able to know who to call. We've tried to have targeted outreach for specific stakeholders in the community. School school professionals, emergency room professionals, cable and utility providers, truckers who are working the interstate highways, beat officers, highway patrol officers. Then the cases will come to us and to the task force. Very often, our best outcome is a victim recovery. Even if we can't prosecute the case, we can actually give that survivor an opportunity to escape the cycle of violence. In order to do that, they need a variety of services, whether it be mental health, educational, vocational, psychological help, legal help, immigration help, or the expungement of prior records. They're incredibly important for helping our survivors start a new part of their life.
All right, so we're going to go right into the next one.
And bankruptcy, housing issues, criminal history issues that are continuously impeding victims' lives to move forward and get jobs and get housing and get financial aid.
The injustice of the criminalization of victims of trafficking is something that is so important that we remedy. New York was the first state in the country to pass a vacating convictions law for survivors of trafficking, to have their criminal records virtually erased if they can show that they were arrested and convicted of crimes because they were trafficked. In terms of legal services, civil-criminal collaboration is incredibly important. We work very carefully with immigration lawyers, with general civil legal services lawyers that deal with housing, with family law.
Sometimes we have filed civil actions on their behalf. Sometimes it's involved just dealing with their immigration status. Sometimes it's, accessing medical care.
To combat trafficking, the EEOC has a unique ability to leverage the anti-discrimination and employment laws of the United States.
We can take individual charges of victims, or an organization can file a charge on behalf of a group. Oftentimes they want to do a complaint anonymous.
We're going to seek for them compensatory damages for the emotional harm they suffered.
Cases come to us in various ways. One is through collaboration with other agencies and interagency groups like Department of Labor, Department of Justice.
The labor law that we enforce that's most frequently involved in trafficking is the Fair Labor Standards Act, which requires individuals to be paid a minimum wage and overtime. It's our responsibility to ensure that they receive, the wages that they should have been paid.
It's important that victims are notified regarding their rights. Victims have a right to timely notifications. Victims have a right to be heard in court. Victims have a right to be treated with dignity and respect, and a right to privacy.
A tremendous number of our clients do not have legal immigration status in the United States, and it's something that they generally are very concerned about when they come into our services.
The whole threat of deportation gets taken away if they learn that there are visas that they could apply for in order to work in the United States and to stay here legally. We can certify that they are a victim of trafficking, and they have been helpful in our investigation of that crime. And then that victim can apply for a T visa or a U visa.
The Migrant Farm Worker Division, we work with victims of labor trafficking. My experience is with sheep herders.
Ingresé con una visa de trabajo, que es la visa H2A. Cuando ingresamos al trabajo, yo llegué para el patrón, ellos me la detuvieron todos los documentos, porque había un miedo total, porque a diario era los gritos, los malos tratos y hasta con empujones. Ya era totalmente un miedo y bien humillado. Nos contactó con los abogados de servicios legales de Colorado. Nos han comprado ropas, alimentos, con casi como 3 meses de pago de la renta de la... También hemos tenido asistencia psicológico con los médicos que en sí nos hemos encontrado en una situación deprimente.
Como lo veo, doctora, we were able to apply for a T visa for him. He was granted a T visa. He was able to bring his family members over here. They are now here living with him.
Y la tranquilidad que me llega es que tenemos el permiso de trabajo, que eso me hace sentir más seguro.
We have laws in this country that protect us, whether we're citizens, whether we're authorized to work, whether we're permanent residents, and even the undocumented. It's our responsibility to provide them a remedy, because not only have they lost wages, they've lost an entire quality of life.
Being a survivor is a continuous thing. We need to provide them with tools, coping skills to continue working on themselves. We really need to help people in that transition time find themselves. And that's when people come into their lives and say, well, can I help you? Can I walk the walk with you and help you find out who you are again? What do you want to do in life? What do you want to be in life now that you're free, that you own your body?
Having a long-term support system of people who have been there now for years has been why I've been able to do as well as I've done. It's that long-term that's important.
Services are so necessary, especially when you're trying to come out of that situation because you don't have anything. Those services, in my case, helped me a lot.
Art therapy works as a non-traditional therapy that helps Native Americans through culturally connecting to your traditional ways. And the biggest piece that's helped me was my spiritual piece. I had to have my spirit back. The biggest part of that was getting to know who I was. I went to becoming an organizer and fighting for people's rights. Now I manage grants. I go out in capacity building to communities of color and immigrant refugee communities. My children are grown. I have 9 grandchildren. I have 7 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. My life is incredible, and I feel good about myself. I know who I am.
The biggest need that I went through was therapy and acceptance. Acceptance that the abuse that I went through, I didn't deserve. That I didn't bring that on myself. Relocated out to Los Angeles for graduate school in psychology. I wanted to work with not just the victim, but the whole victim support network, family members, friends, whoever is in their support network.
Being a male survivor, that's what's needed, support. Being able to understand that it happens to everybody, not just the male or the female, but to everybody. If others can see that there are male survivors and that it's okay to tell, then maybe we can get additional help out and get the word out that we're here to help.
Y como humanos, como personas, también debemos darnos un valor moral, ¿no? Que sí somos importantes, tanto como ellos y como nosotros. Que estén con documentos o sin documentos, aquí en los Estados Unidos tenemos todos los derechos y hay una institución que sí nos apoya, sí nos ayudan y que no se queden callados de los malos tratos y de ciertas violencias. Traten de comunicarse, porque si uno no se comunica, nadie sabe nada.
I was a victim of human trafficking. I'm happy that I got good guidance that work in a bank. I'm currently the operations supervisor, branch manager. I created a very simple program. It's all about banking. I was able to help these people that didn't know the basic of a banking. They felt that I helped them a lot, and that was a good experience for me.
Hi, kamusta po? I want to help my community.
Get paid for the overtime. So as a Damayan community,
I came out from the darkness. I think that's very powerful to meet workers, to encourage them to really to know their rights and to be part of this community.
I never thought that what I went through would be useful.
The courts have found when they have taken any
Now I'm in my last year of law school and enjoying being a mom and helping train law enforcement and using negative experiences that I've been through to put it to something useful.
As a journalist, I am just one of the few people who not only can write, but can actually put their experiences together in a book. Because writing the book was both therapeutic and challenging. I'm glad to have a second chance, and that is why I have dedicated my life to this effort to help other victims. If you have not walked in their shoes, you have no idea what they're going through.
We need to focus on that person first. Because when they have reached to be survivors, that's when they love themselves again, they have self-worth, and then they're resilient, and they want to continue with life.
For a person that have been through human trafficking situation, I recommend that think about what you want to do in life. There are a lot of things out there for you. It's never late. It's never late. There will be a lot of people out there to help you.
It's not much for me to add. I'm just going through these because I think it's pretty self-explanatory what they're talking about and the things that they're going through. So I'm just going to continue.
The collaborative effort, the collection of evidence, the insertion of undercovers and surveillance are keys to human trafficking investigations.
If you can combine the lessons of organized crime with domestic violence and sexual assault, you really have the approach that's required to successfully work these cases.
These types of cases need to be victim-centered, but not victim-built. Yes, we need to focus on that victim, and that victim should be the center of that case. But we can't solely rely on that victim to help us make the case.
As victims or survivors, we have been through a great deal of trauma in our lives.
We start from the beginning and go very slowly, accepting the fact that one interview is not going to get all your answers.
A lot of times if we have a minor involved, we have forensic interview specialists.
May I have a seat, please?
A forensic interviewer is a person who has been trained on how to ask questions in a non-leading fashion about how they have been victimized and to make sure that we get as much information that would be relevant to the court with respect to what has happened to that person.
There's a lot of trauma. There's also a lot of memory problems, and the understanding of that is very important too.
We consult with victims every step of the prosecution. We work with social service agencies in partnership.
So I think it was a great meeting. There was some good back and forth, and it got people, I think, thinking about what clients actually need.
In order to have a successful prosecution, it involves detection of the crime, investigation, prosecution, and providing appropriate services to the victims. And for all 4 of those stages, it's really important for the state and federal and local law enforcement to be able to work together.
In our John sting, during the actual arrests, officers will want to know more from the John. If their goal was to find an underage victim, if they can identify a pimp, so give us investigative leads.
You've got everybody discussing the same leads and sharing information.
The code enforcement and the health inspectors that already have a lawful ability to enter the businesses, they can be trained in human trafficking and look for signs without intimidating the managers and potential victims that might be in there as well.
They can go into establishment with a lot less paperwork and start looking.
We look for other corroborative evidence. Those can be weapons, it can be photos. We have found charts, which are almost the equivalent of drug ledgers, where the victims are writing down dates with the clients where they are going to go engage in a commercial sex act. Because sometimes the trafficking case is hard to make. There are other charges that either can be an addition or a replacement to a trafficking charge. There can be a child pornography charge, kidnapping charges, immigration charges, extortion charges, felon in possession of a firearm. Those charges can ensure that that evidence gets into trial. Oftentimes, the defendant will post their victims' online advertisements. We can get electronic evidence in that form that also helps to corroborate the victim.
One of the cases that we've worked in the task force is Operation Little Girl Lost, which was the first use of the Illinois Safe Children's Act wiretap provision.
And we saw victims in that particular operation, one as young as 12.
By having that insider view of electronic surveillance, we were able to charge 10 individuals, and that case resulted in positive outcomes without a single victim having to testify.
Looking for labor trafficking is a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. You have to expand and step outside of the boundaries a little bit. I try not to show up in uniform or in a patrol car. Try to avoid interrogative type of questioning. You want to try to make them understand that they're your main priority. Until the victim feels safe, they're not going to be very helpful as a witness. So your case is going to be difficult to put together.
We see that a lot of the victims fear testifying in court because they fear that what if the trafficker's released, and they fear reprisal.
My trafficker was my godmother. Going through the whole court process was not easy. One, because I have to be in front of my godmother once again, and two, because someone who was trying to defend her. She was taken to jail, so she has two consecutive life sentences. I need someone to help me and guide me and be my advocate in court and help me navigate through the process.
Part of a victim-centered approach is working with the victim throughout the entire prosecution. The last thing we want is for a victim to feel re-traumatized. We may reach a resolution where a sentence may be less than a defendant would receive at trial, but it's appropriate to keep the victim from having to experience testifying.
I am a labor trafficking survivor. I came as a religious visa. So I was there for the leader. I was not giving a salary. I was told to take care of their grandchildren. I was with them 24 hours. So I was sleeping in the same room with the children. I got out from this situation in 2003. And then I was scared to be undocumented. When I came to Tamayan, they treated you as a warm family.
Tamayan is an organization of Filipino migrant workers. The people that we serve work as nannies, elderly caregivers, house cleaners, personal assistants, and other work in private households.
Ito ho, mga karapatan ho ng mga domestic workers in New York.
We're really looking to reach workers who maybe have experienced trafficking or who are in the best position to meet trafficked workers. Labor trafficking is when one person holds or obtains another person in coerced or forced labor. It's the individual employer or trafficker who's forcing, coercing, manipulating a worker. So the indicators that we see are usually of threats, passport and other identification theft. It's usually restricted movement, restricted communication.
For a case of trafficking, what we're usually going to be looking for are signs that the workers don't have a freedom to move about. They aren't getting paid for the work that they're performing. Maybe they don't have identifying documents. They're being made to live in substandard living conditions. They may be skilled or unskilled laborers, young or old, male or female.
I never heard them complain. You know, it didn't cross my mind that they were being abused.
When you'd ask the boys, how's it going, then none of them ever said, well, this happened to me or this happened to me or whatever.
We had a case, and it involved the parent exploitation of American workers, and they were adults with intellectual disabilities. They were transported from Texas to a turkey processing plant in Iowa. For approximately 35 years, these adults were working for a company for at least 40 hours per week, but only being paid $65 a month. They were hidden away from much of the world. These men were punished in cruel ways, and so after 35 or 40 years of blood, sweat, and tears, when these men were finally rescued, they had nothing to show for it. What we find in a case like that, even involving people with intellectual disabilities, is that the things that make them vulnerable are the very same things that you might see in a case involving foreign workers.
The same type of force and coercion that a shackle would be is the same kind of mental anguish they're going through with some of the things that a trafficker might threaten them with.
In order to build any kind of relationship, you have to go out to them.
Back and utilizing your strengths.
I'm talking about everything from working with the social service providers, the clinics, the churches, anywhere where labor trafficking victims may go for strength or for help. That's where law enforcement should be reaching out and proving that we're serious about helping.
The Illinois Migrant Legal Assistance Project provides free legal services to migrant and seasonal farm workers. When we do specific outreach, we go to labor camps. Many times they have basic questions like, where is there a church that might have a service in Spanish? And those open up lines of communication where they come to trust us and talk with us. Usually by the second or third time, you'll get a sense of, are there some deeper issues here that are going on?
I think it all starts by being a good listener
and letting them know that you are going to try to do whatever you can to help.
I met my trafficker back in my country, Dominican Republic. They offer us job in the United States, working in hotels. When we came here, what happened is there was not such a job like that. They got a job in DVD manufacturing company. We already invest a lot of money to come, so we had to accept the job, and we did. But he treated us like we were no one. We were living in a one-bedroom apartment, and it was 3 people living there. My paycheck every week was like $39. When we were in that situation, people could see us. We were hardworking in that company. Nobody noticed anything. And then we met a Catholic charity person, and we explained her our situation. So she contacted one agent from ICE.
Ronnie had so many concerns. That was the biggest trust barrier to get over, to let him know that I am genuinely concerned for you and your friends and coworkers and for your families.
They made all possible to bring my wife and my 2 kids. I got a job thanks to the people that were out there to help me, but they changed our lives. I mean, they saved us. And I can tell you now, because I'm a survivor of human trafficking, yeah.
The world of a trafficking victim is constant fear, constant dehumanization, just feeling like you are not even a person anymore. I experienced sex trafficking. I was a single mom trying to finish college, and that was what eventually led me to an adult club. It wasn't something I was comfortable with, but feeling pretty desperate, I thought, let me just try it, see what happens. The second night was when I met my trafficker. He was giving me what I thought was a legitimate job offer. You know, he said, let's go over to my business. But once I got in there, I was held against my will, and that was the process of beatings and rapes by multiple subjects, and held in there for over 12 hours. And because that process was methodical and designed to break me down, I was very much like a robot. I was going to do what he told me to do. It wasn't so much that nobody noticed, it was they didn't know what to look for or what to call it. Sex trafficking is the action of a perpetrator recruiting, transporting, maintaining, harboring through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of exploitation.
Law enforcement can be very proactive when it comes to combating sex trafficking, especially if you know where to look.
If you go on the internet, street-level prostitution, massage parlors, it's the most easily identifiable. That doesn't mean that all those individuals are victims of human trafficking, but it's an easy place to start.
I came in contact with a lot of law enforcement officials, and they just weren't trained. Some of them were well-intentioned. What you're really gonna want to look at is other signs that indicate exploitation. I saw this in shelters, medical doctors as well, ER physicians. That's why training is so important.
One of our goals then is to try to find new innovative ways of identifying the victims, letting them know that there are people in law enforcement, human service providers, and the courts that would like to help them.
As a public defender, I started to look more critically at our representation of people charged with prostitution offenses. These clients weren't identifying themselves as victims of trafficking, but many of them had been completely controlled and scripted by the force, fraud, and coercion that we understand to make up human trafficking. We had to do better in trying to address these clients' needs so that people who may be in very dangerous, abusive, violent situations don't have to continue in those situations, and that an arrest make their life worse.
Honorable Judge Teresa Pauly is now presiding.
The idea here is not to prosecute the potential sex trafficking victims.
That happens a lot. A person is convicted of crimes and then are eliminated from all the services that could actually help them escape the trafficking.
You don't have to show any force, fraud, or coercion if they're a minor. You've got to be very, very astute in establishing the age, because what is difficult in a lot of jurisdictions, the trafficking statutes may have a different age and consider the child as adult.
The gangs are heavily involved in sex trafficking and running girls and boys. We need to start talking more about the problem. Schools can help with that. Youth groups, counselors, the teachers, the janitors, the school security, giving them a list of red flags of what to look for.
Providers out there often miss the cues. Young people who describe boyfriends significantly older. Young people who have bruises and cigarette burns.
Many times, offenders will brand victims. It's a sign of ownership on their part, particularly if the tattoos are near the face and neck.
People who show up with a lot of cash that nobody knows where they're getting it from, or very expensive items.
In a courtroom setting, you can see when somebody is exerting improper power or control over a person by their demeanor, by where they sit, by how they try to get to talk to a client. Just watching for those sorts of things probably is the way we identify it most often.
If we're recognizing signs, we're able to do something about it. My trafficking was for almost 8 years. He was a close friend of the family. The words were used, if you tell, I'll cut you. I'll bust you in your head, I'll bust you in your nose. Being a male and being sex trafficked, when you go to a person and say, hey, so-and-so is doing this to me. Oh, we don't believe you, stop lying. We're the victims. We need people to believe who the victims really are.
Healthcare providers need to become sensitized to the whole issue of sex trafficking victimization.
Women who come in with multiple STDs, multiple unwanted pregnancies.
If they're brought into an emergency room setting, the injuries may be the fairly classic intimate partner violence injuries. As a healthcare provider, if you fail to identify and recognize this type of patient, you may very well fail to have saved their life.
The best way to get people in is to be available, to make sure that they know and that you are over providing them with resources. Here's my card, and if you need something, just call anytime, day or night, and we'll make sure we can get you some help.
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Good. You can create a robust approach that allows an individual to be addressed from all dimensions. Help them deal with their legal situations. Help them find safe places to live and get the kind of therapy that they need to move forward.
Having the resources available, allowing the victim to choose, but giving her support to do so is important.
Coming together, we can help foster their recovery from the kind of traumatic events that they have suffered.
My trafficker was my husband. There was no way I could reach out to anybody for help.
We're scared. We're scared to run. We're scared to tell anybody what's going on.
It was an incredibly violent situation. I felt like there was no way I could get out.
It was awful. The whole experience.
I was full-time babysitter and house cleaning, cooking. I wasn't getting paid. I was lied to. I was abused. I didn't know I was a victim of human trafficking until I told my story.
Human trafficking is really compelling
someone to any form of work or service against their will.
Force, fraud, and coercion is really the crux of the crime.
Human traffickers can be just about anyone from any walk of life. Owners of small businesses, head of a household. A lot of the trafficking involves domestic servitude. Hoteliers, restaurant owners, owners of massage parlors, agricultural farm owners.
It can be a trafficker who tells a woman, I want to be your boyfriend, I love you, and if you love me, you're going to go out and have sex for money. It can be kind of psychological like that, or it can be more overt and more physical. It can be hitting, abusing, keeping them away from any support systems.
They may have their documents taken away from them, a passport and things like that, and they're sort of held in a way that makes them fearful to complain. And if they do complain and they're fired.
One myth about trafficking is that it involves people being smuggled in containers across borders. Smuggling is a crime against a border. Trafficking is a crime against a person.
I still see this attitude of it's just immigrants or it's just people in other countries. It happens to U.S. citizens so much more than people are aware.
There really is no one profile of a trafficked person. There are clearly themes or patterns, but if you look through the investigation reports, you'll see cases that are very, very diverse.
Trafficking, it doesn't know any boundaries. And it happens all over America. So I came from kind of a more privileged background, but it still happened to me, and a male. The victim can be male, female, transgendered, anyone.
There is a myth out there, partly because of movies, that trafficking victims are chained up, and that's not the case, but it doesn't make the victim any less unable to leave. Oftentimes they're worried for their family members. Traffickers will often say, I know people that will do things to them.
We need to understand that freedom of movement does not equal freedom of choice. Most of the time, being trapped is something we can't see. It's something that a trafficker pinpoints as a vulnerability and is able to use against the victim.
You're initially brainwashed, and then over a period of time you become conditioned where you start to accept that this is all you can do.
The natural stakeholders in this issue are certainly law enforcement, legal advocates, social service providers. There's other players involved as well.
It is important to engage the community in human trafficking cases because victims often don't self-identify. They don't come forward to law enforcement.
Okay, siwa na po ako. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We try to make sure the community is educated regarding human trafficking because those citizens in the community are the eyes and the ears.
It's medical workers, it's educators, it's personnel at homeless shelters.
There has to be a support system within the community, psychological counseling, shelter, and vocational education so they can reintegrate, become a healthy individual.
We can't do this alone. No one has the capacity to provide every single thing that a victim or survivor of human trafficking needs.
There's an intentional effort to get everyone together so we know how to share resources, we know how to work together, and to make sure at the end of the day, a victim becomes a survivor.
Human trafficking is a crime that takes away souls, to take away memories. My trafficker was someone who knew my family.
I was given specific instructions. You're going to do what I ask you to do. If you know, your mom and your 3 brothers in Honduras are going to die. So I allowed one crime to happen, so another crime wouldn't. A neighbor reported that so many people were coming in and out of the house. Then that's how I was rescued. Most people didn't understand what was I going through.
Boys are traditionally under-recognized and underserved. They don't have specific residential treatment homes where they can go. They may go to shelters, but they don't have the same services that girls do. And I think across the country, more and more, there's an awareness that this absolutely has to be addressed.
I was kicked out of my parents' home because of my sexual orientation. And in a lot of ways, it really conditioned me for being very vulnerable.
It took a long time for us to understand that actually these were exploited youth, typically very vulnerable youth who have been in foster care or homeless or runaway youth. And once we began to understand how easily they could be groomed and recruited by offenders, we then began to recognize that these were children who were being exploited.
Children who have been trafficked, both for actually sex and labor trafficking, are more vulnerable for a variety of reasons. Obviously, their age, their developmental capacity, they're more easily manipulated, and traffickers know that.
I was born in Ecuador. When I was 16, my stepsisters told my dad that it would be a good idea if I will come here. They say she could help with one baby while I work, and then she will go to school in the afternoon. I never ended up going to school. I was home 24 hours with the baby, and then little by little, she started telling me to cook, to clean. I wasn't getting paid. I was monitored everything that I did. I felt trapped without no exit. And it made me feel that they were doing something great by giving me food and giving me a place to be. And the way that I had to pay them back is doing everything for them.
There are professionals that are already working in the field with trafficking victims. Child welfare agencies, child protection workers, juvenile justice professionals, including attorneys, judges, guardian ad litems, court-appointed special attorneys, case managers, social workers, or foster care systems, school counselors. Some victims of trafficking are going to school. In fact, their traffickers pick them up at the end of the day.
Any young person is vulnerable. And one of the biggest predictive variables is a young person who has been sexually abused.
Child sexual abuse, human trafficking, most people, think of them as separate, and I think there's much more overlap.
Before we talk about the reason that you're here today, I want to tell you a couple of things.
We need to have a well-coordinated response that cares for the well-being of the child. At child advocacy centers, we always are looking at to the possibility that other things may have occurred. The civic purpose of the forensic interview is to gather as much factual information from the child's perspective, and it's part of a broader multidisciplinary team related to the investigation. Children who were in our treatment program last year on average had 8.5 different victimizations. Not until we really find out what the child has experienced can we truly provide them help.
There are many challenges in serving this population. People don't understand the complex nature of this victimization.
To describe the relationship between a trafficker and a victim is a domestic violence situation. There's this connection to the abuser.
In many cases, children will return to the trafficker, and they're not ready to get out of the life at that point, and it may be months before they are, years even. But if we can establish some trust with the child, maybe that'll make them open up next time and bring them a little bit closer to making the decision to leave.
The types of services that these victims need, of course, are trauma-informed, are comprehensive. They need time in therapy to understand their victimization.
Making sure we connect them with a safe place to live, but also a quality of treatment, therapy is absolutely critical for their viability.
Human trafficking is a crime that takes away souls. take away memories. My trafficker was someone who knew my family.
One of the challenges for them is integrating back into a school system and accessing often specialized services to make sure that their needs are being addressed, particularly with large gaps in schooling. For foreign national children, there are clearly language barriers, so they would need English as second language classes in addition to mainstream education. There may be guardianship issues, so these children are navigating many different systems and different legal processes.
Finding ways that young people can engage with communities where they can learn new skills is important, and re-engaging them with their communities of origin. Native American, the African American, and faith-based community is just tremendous in terms of helping us support our young people moving forward.
Once I found the power of my story, I decided to become an advocate. I have shared my story as a way that people be inspired to make change, as a way of people become advocates, just like my casa for me. Marcos, my court-appointed special advocate, he came into my life 2 days before my 18th birthday.
His spirit just wasn't there. You could see in his eyes. And my first instinct was to try to cheer this kid up.
He spoke Spanish. He really came into my life and really helped me. If it wasn't for his help and support, I wouldn't be the advocate I am today.
We don't have evidence-based practices for the field of trafficking yet, but we need to borrow from other fields that have seen success. It's working with those providers to understand what some of those unique and specialized needs of a trafficked youth might be within their existing successful system.
And we have to remember that it is the individual child's journey.
Swamir's is a success, and having gone through everything he went through and him being the person he is now, I'm just glad that he's able to help others.
So, not much that needs to be said about this. I think it's very self-explanatory, just taking a look at some of the different faces of transporting and their stories and different ways that it can happen. So hopefully this has been very informative. You guys let me know in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Take it light, take it slow. Tell them Uncle Mike, and I'm just saying VB told you so. See you later, guys. Bye.